GraceandTruthRadio.world proudly presents Life Coaching for Men, improving their relationships with their wives and learning to communicate for a more fulfilling and satisfying marriage. And now, Men Loving Well, with Christian counselor, author, and relationship coach, Dr. Jim Slaughter.
Welcome to Men Loving Well. I am glad you joined us today. You know, men come under fire these days just for being men. And it raises the question, what does it mean to be truly a man? Last week I began a two-part series entitled Qualities That Make a Man Truly a Man. And we talked about three of those qualities. It was kind of a brown bag theology, we used to call it, where we get together and just talk about issues off the top of our head. But the three qualities that we talked about last week that make a man truly a man were embracing masculinity, thinking and acting maturely, and fulfilling responsibility. Today we'll talk about some other key qualities of men, so let's get started. Here's a fourth quality that makes a man truly a man. A man purposely initiates. A man initiates action. He purposely initiates action. He doesn't sit around waiting for things to happen. He makes things happen. He moves. He moves through his world and into the lives of the people around him, intentionally and purposely. Some years ago, one of the founders of Christian psychotherapy, Larry Crabb, gripped my attention with his statement that a primary trait of maleness is movement. I thought, what in the world does that mean? But in his bestseller, The Silence of Adam, Crabb says, let me encourage you to think of masculinity as energy. I love that thought. Energy. A natural momentum within the heart of every man, he says, a power and an urge to move into life. Strong men take the initiative, even when they may not know what to do or how to do it. Being a true man means having the courage to keep on moving, even in the midst of confusion. If we stop to look around, it's only temporary. As men, we move towards God, worshiping Him, praying to Him, eagerly looking for Him throughout all the Scriptures, humbling ourselves in our brokenness and lukewarm devotion, waiting for Him to fill us with His Spirit so that we can serve Him with a purpose and with passion. As married men, we move toward our wives. Now, for some of us, that's going to be kind of a paralyzing thought. So what do I say? What do I do? Well, you say or do something. You move. In Eden, God called Adam to protect and to nurture. When Eve was mesmerized by that serpent, Adam didn't protect or nurture. He went silent. He was afraid to move. He didn't move towards her. He didn't move towards the serpent. He didn't try to intervene. He was refusing to move, holding back because of some, who knows, greater and prior commitment to safety maybe. And he watched the flowers in his world become thorns and thistles. A man moves towards his wife to protect her and to nurture her. The inauthentic man is controlling and dangerous. But the true man moves towards his wife actively, but not aggressively. As true men, we move toward our wives with compassion and gentleness, with a sense of freedom and joy. We initiate conversation with her. We initiate togetherness with her. We initiate intimacy with her. And God made us to move towards her. God made her to receive us into her world. Our bodies are made like that. They're made to fit together. She wants us to initiate. She longs for movement from a man who's truly a man, active but not aggressive, gentle but not weak, a man purposeful and free. Then we've got to realize that every day we move either towards godly manhood or away from it. Strength is the opposite of violence. Intimacy is the opposite of lust, and we need to understand the difference. The man who is truly a man initiates. He moves into his world to protect and to nurture. A true man purposely initiates. There's a fifth quality that makes a man truly a man. A man operates independently but accountably. A man operates independently but accountably. Let's take independence first. Operating independently doesn't mean being stubborn or headstrong. It does mean that we go about life connecting with people, not disconnecting from people. The independence that characterizes true masculinity has to do with the way a man makes his own way in the world and how he relates to other people. Moses develops this principle in Genesis 2 of the creation account. God created the woman as the man's perfect complement. Now this statement follows. This is why a man leaves his father and mother and joins with his wife, and they become one flesh. This comment by Moses makes it clear that a man, in response to a growing and appropriate sense of independence, leaves his family of origin, that is his father and mother, to start a new family with his own wife. He leaves physically, that is out from under their roof, and he leaves emotionally, no longer needing them to care for him. The man assumes new responsibility by stepping out to make his own way in the world. When he gets married, he joins with his wife. The word there means welds himself tightly to her, and becomes really, though mysteriously, one flesh with her through sexual intimacy. The man establishes an appropriate independence from his parents. He no longer needs their nurture. He no longer needs their protection. He no longer needs their provision. A man who operates independently makes up his own mind as God leads. No longer a child, the charge to obey his parents is replaced by the command to honor them. He may seek their advice, but he and his wife look to the Lord for guidance as a team. Sometimes a man's independence becomes short-circuited because he allows his parents to have more influence over him than they should. They pressure him to do this thing or that thing, or go this direction or go that direction, often to the point he makes choices against his own will. You ever been there? That happened to you? He does what his parents want him to do, rather than what he and his wife had decided is best for them. See, a man abandons his independence when he gives in through pressure to reverse a decision when he was convicted that it was the right decision to make, or worse, when he violates his own conscience or his principles because of pressure from the outside. A man who's truly a man operates independently. He doesn't live with mom and dad, but leaves his family to start a new life and separate home. He's willing to take adult responsibility and to make up his own mind. No longer needy, he makes his own way in the world. When he gets married, he joins tightly and permanently to his wife to form a new unit, a new family, a new team. They may seek advice from parents and friends, but they follow God's guidance in all final decisions. There's another consideration in this matter of a man's independence. Because a man operates independently doesn't mean he's free to be rigidly autonomous and irresponsible and self-serving. He's not exempt from the evaluation or even the criticism of others, but holds himself willingly accountable to them. Besides being accountable to our wives to protect them and to nurture them from the Genesis 2 passage that we talked about, men are to be accountable to other men. But most of all, we're to be accountable to God. We invite others to engage us about our ways of thinking, our decision-making, our behavior patterns, spoken words, and to challenge us if they think we're off target. A smart man, a godly man, a true man, communes with God, sensitive in his conscience to doing the right thing. If the Spirit of God convicts his conscience, he lays it all out on the table, admitting, that is, confessing his mistake and asking God for power and new direction. A good man, a wise man, knows there are times when it may be hard for him to realize his thinking may be a little off, maybe something leading to trouble even. We might say we've got tunnel vision or that we can't see the forest for the trees. We're missing something, either accidentally or intentionally. It's times like these when a trusted friend can see the big picture. He knows our faults and he sees our mistakes probably better than we can. When we make ourselves accountable to a few good men, they can keep us on a righteous path by telling us what they really see, not just what we may want to hear. Moses was wearing himself out judging disputes of the people after leaving Egypt. Because Moses made himself accountable to his father-in-law Jethro, he was willing to take Jethro's advice. Jethro says something like, "Man, you're wearing yourself out doing all this stuff. Why not get some trustworthy men to help you settle these disputes?" And he did. Moses was headed down the wrong path. Jethro saw it, and Moses made the correction. Every man needs 3 or 4 Jethros in his life, men he's accountable to for course corrections. Read the story in Exodus 18. And now a question, though. Can you name 4 men who know your story and who will tell you the truth about yourself? And if you do, when's the last time you talked to them? Accountability to our wives, accountability to other men, but now and most of all, accountability to God. I think some of what God meant when he referred to David as a man after my own heart is a spiritual sensitivity to what is right and what is wrong. David's conscience was quickly pricked when the Holy Spirit convicted him of wrongdoing. When David writes about this in the Psalms, I can visualize him running to a worship place, maybe the tabernacle at Shiloh, maybe the oasis at En-Gedi, running as fast as he could lay it all out there. Maybe the worship place was wherever he happened to be at the moment of his conviction. He stops. He talks with God. He's filled after his confession, and he moves on. David was consistently aware of God's presence with him, and he was terrified when the thought crossed his mind that God might ever leave him because of his sin. Psalm 51 is David's confessional prayer after his sin with Bathsheba. In it, he says to God, "For I know my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Against you, you only have I sinned, and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are proved right when you speak, and justified when you judge. Do not cast me from your presence, or take your Holy Spirit from me." David considers himself accountable to the Lord. Here we see him transparent and vulnerable. In Psalm 32, David describes what it felt like when he ignored his accountability to God to acknowledge his sin. He says, "When I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was sapped as in the heat of summer." Verses 3 and 4. When David finally gave in to God's relentless pressure, he confessed his sins and transgressions to the Lord, and God took away the burden of his guilt, the guilt he had been carrying all along. In verses 8 and 9, God speaks his own words through David, exhorting those who would try to escape their accountability not to do it. God says, "Do not be like the horse or the mule that have no understanding, but must be controlled by bit and bridle, or they won't come to you." God is saying, you're accountable to me when you sin. And when you do sin, talk to me about it. Come to me on your own so I don't have to rein you in. Men of understanding acknowledge their accountability to God, and they go to him of their own free will. Accountability to our wives, accountability to our friends, but above all, for a man who would be truly a man, accountability to God. You know, there's so much more I could say here, maybe another time, but with all the acclaim that God heaped on him, David understood that a man who is truly a man doesn't go off on his own half-cocked to do whatever he wants and to live for himself. He knew men are put on this earth to serve God and to serve others. He made himself accountable to God as shepherd and king. He made himself accountable to his own people as a ranger who watched over them and protected them. He made himself accountable even to his worst enemy, King Saul, whose life he could have snuffed out like a candle, but he didn't. A man after God's own heart, accountable and sensitive. I want a heart like that. I was in Israel once talking to an Israeli guide. I asked him about his thoughts on David. He answered, "We still consider David to be our greatest king." No wonder. In summary, here are the qualities that we as men must be building into our lives in order to be truly men. This is what I believe. We embrace our masculinity. We think and act maturely. We fulfill our responsibility. We purposely initiate. And we operate independently and accountably. Lord, strengthen these qualities in our lives. Make us men who are truly men. Masculine men, mature men, responsible men, initiating men, independent and accountable men, as we move into our world to make a good difference.
Thank you again for joining us. Men Loving Well airs live every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Central Time on graceandtruthradio.world. If you would like to contact or coach with Dr. Jim Slaughter, reach out to him on Facebook.com, Living Well Show. Email him at jslaughterphd@yahoo.com or contact him at his clinic, Life Solutions, 817-232-1363. We look forward to seeing you again next week here on Men Loving Well.